that we have in the future. Also, do look at our social media. Allie, our program assistant, has done a wonderful job this month in helping us celebrate National Poetry Month by posting poems by young Georgia poets in our River of Words program, along with their pieces of art, as well as established poets like Karen Head, Megan Volpert, who have read poems or who have submitted video. So please do check that out as well. Speaking of Allie, our wonderful program assistant, who this has to be the most interesting first year for a program assistant for the Georgia Center for the Book. She is our Zoom guardian tonight. So a few words from her, since I am not as well versed in the technological world yet, but we're going to get there. She suggests that you all look to the left-hand side of your screen and have speaker mode on. This allows you to see the person who is speaking instead of all the little people in the gallery. Also, be sure to keep yourself on mute. Not only does that reduce the new room noise, that also keeps echoes from forming in the back of the room. We're also going to ask you to submit your questions via chat, and those will come directly to me. So if you submit the questions to Joe, at the end of the evening, we will of course forward those on to the poets. We also ask that you don't message the poets directly during the reading so as to interrupt them or anything like that. Other than that, we would like you to sit back and have a wonderful time. I, of course, thank you for allowing us to come into your homes this evening. I am sure we are all sitting there seeing our wonderful backgrounds of books as the literarians that we all are. It's almost like a fetish to see who has the best bookcase. So no judgment, but you can look in awe, and that's perfectly fine tonight. Once again, thank you so much to Colin Kelly for Poetry Atlanta, Julie Bloemeke, Mike James, and J.C. Reilly for reading tonight. It's a wonderful way to celebrate National Poetry Month. We also want to direct you to independent bookstores who are doing such a wonderful job during this time, getting books out to people through the mail. Many of our poets have books at Karis Books, at Eagle Eye. You can also go through their publishers like Luchador Press to obtain these books and get them by mail. And please do that. I encourage you to look up your independent bookstores and see what they are doing and what they can offer you. It changes daily, unfortunately, but those are the times we're living in. So sit back, enjoy. Thank you all for coming. And now, Colin Kelly.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I am Colin Kelly. I am the chairman of Poetry Atlanta, and this is Poetry Atlanta Presents. And it's our quarterly reading series, and this is the first time we've ever done one virtually, so very interesting. And I see on my screen that there are 45 people watching us right now. I guess that includes us as well. So that's very exciting. That's a big crowd. So thank you for being here. Before I introduce the poets tonight, I'm going to read a poem, not my own, but by Yvonne Boland, who passed away today at the age of 75. She suffered a stroke, and I know that she is a favorite of many here, and I wanted to read one of her poems, and I thought this one was very appropriate, especially for the time that we're in right now. It's called Quarantine. And I will see if I can get through this without getting a little verklempt. It's tough. This is a really beautiful poem. Quarantine by Yvonne Boland. In the worst hour of the worst season of the worst year of a whole people, a man set out from the workhouse with his wife. He was walking, they were both walking north. She was sick with famine fever and could not keep up. He lifted her and put her on his back. He walked like that west and north until at nightfall, under freezing stars, they arrived. In the morning, they were both found dead of cold, of hunger, of the toxins of a whole history. But her feet were held against his breastbone. The last heat of his flesh was his last gift to her. Let no love poem ever come to this threshold. There is no place here for the inexact praise of the easy graces and sensuality of the body. There is only time for this merciless inventory. Their death together in the winter of 1847, and what they suffered, how they lived, and what there is between a man and a woman, and in which darkness it can be best proved. Yvonne Boland. So, thank you for listening to that. And so what I'm going to do, we're going to try to keep up some of our traditions like we usually do when we're doing these live at the Decatur Library. I'm going to introduce all three poets right now to you and tell you a little about them, and then they are going to read in the order I've introduced them. And as Joe said, afterwards, we will have a Q&A, and then I may have a few more notes for you too at the very end. So let me first start by introducing Mike James, who is joining us from Nashville, just outside Nashville, Tennessee. And he has been published in numerous magazines throughout the country and in such places as Plain Song, Laurel Poetry Review, Birmingham Poetry Review, and Tar River Poetry. He is the author of 14 poetry collections, including his latest, Journeyman Suitcase from Luchador Press. Julie E. Bloemeke received her MFA through the Bennington Writing Seminars and an MA from the University of South Carolina. Her poems have been widely anthologized and appeared in numerous literary journals, including Gulf Coast, Prairie Schooner, Poet Lore, and others. Slide to Unlock is her first full-length poetry collection, and it is out right now from Sibling Rivalry Press. And she wanted me to remind you that you can order the book right now from Sibling Rivalry, and if you use the code READ, you get free shipping. So you can order directly from Sibling Rivalry Press. And closing us out will be J.C. Reilly, who writes poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, and drama. Her full-length poetry collection about witchcraft, herbalism, twin sisters, and murder, called What Magic May Not Alter, is out right now from Madville Publishing. It is spectacular. I blurbed it, so I'm biased. So, and she's the assistant editor of the Atlanta Review here, and you can follow her at her blog at jcreilly.com. So let's kick off with Mike James.
Thank you, Colin. I want to thank Poetry Atlanta for setting this up. I want to thank my fellow readers, Julie and JC, and especially want to thank Colin Kelly. He is a poet that I was reading before I ever moved to Atlanta in 2007, and that I've kept reading after moving away in 2015. So always reading with pleasure. I am just reading tonight from Journeyman Suitcase, which is my latest collection out from Luchador Press, out from Kansas. It came out right before COVID hit, because I am a master of impeccable timing. And the book is a mixture of formal poems, prose poems, and free verse poems. I sort of wrote it as a relief, because the book prior to this was a book-length erasure poem that I had panic attacks the whole time I was writing it. And this was written fairly quickly, but it also came out of a sense of relief, and I hope the poems show that. I'm only going to read prose poems tonight. I've been writing prose poems for a long time, but I started writing a lot of them several years ago, because I found that people did not necessarily take those as being as autobiographical as more delineated verse is. I found that I would give a reading, and someone would come up to me afterwards and say, "Boy, I really hate that about your mother." And I would look at them and be rather askance of what they were talking about, and realize that they took the I in the poems as the I being autobiographical. But if you interject a talking cat, then people tend to not understand it's not autobiographical. So, like I said, these are all prose poems. And I'm going to start with the first one, and it's called Chris's Stigmata of Everyday Choices. No matter how old he got, his wants were for things which hurt. He told time by cigarette coughs. All the door-to-door clock salespeople knew to skip his house. To make extra certain, Little Bo Peep was his go-to disguise. Now and then, this was back when those things mattered, the night got really dark. Stars were never his friends, not in the sky or in his imaginary drive-in. His smile had the look of a bird's nest with no eggs. Awkward was what he knew. especially when he traveled across the plains and worried about getting lost among tall grass in towns which advertised the resting places of gunfighters and taxidermists. Little Bo Peep was his go-to disguise. Some weekends, he climbed a tree and smiled and waited for a bird, any bird, to land. Birds have their own problems we won't discuss here. Most are limited in the ways they can hide. And this next poem is called Fallen Angel. And I'm reading it because my friend Agnes asked me to read it. Fallen Angel. The first job he took after he quit heaven was at a butcher shop. His halo sliced meat pretty well. The shop owner liked the novelty, as did customers, used to nothing more interesting than sausage plumpness. But, like even the best Broadway performance, the gig ended. The health department sent him out the door amid the owner's sobs and sighs. Halos are hard to clean, no matter how strong the disinfectant. Slicing with one violates regulations which date back before phone book popularity. After the butcher shop, he became a cowboy. He tied a rope to his halo and called it a lasso. It worked almost as well as Wonder Woman's golden lasso, though she was from a different place. And this poem's called Pastel Adjustments. I don't know if anyone was a fan of the television show of a few years ago called The Preacher, which was on for a couple years. It was kind of a cult show. This poem actually came out of an episode of that. And if you watch the show, then you'll get the reference. If not, it's not necessary. But it's called Pastel Adjustments. His life, a vending machine filled only with zag nuts. He was tired of sameness. What he really wanted was a faux leather knapsack of absurdities. Not for any commonly misspelled tattoos or not so lackadaisical snowflake. More an unhatched egg flying in perfect geometry across the sky, or even wind blowing both ways at once. He had a fondness for anything not seen. He didn't always drive through Ghost on his way to work, though on any morning he might recall the red of Sally Hedgepath's nail polish. Anything long remembered becomes something else. As a kid, he liked to juggle. His mother told him, "Stop that, go outside and hit a ball." And so he ran and ran like Dick and Jane and Spot. He learned to speak in simple sentences. All his socks were black. When he found a penny, he picked it up. When he had enough pennies, he rolled them. He never put a red or pink ribbon on his penny rolls before he took them to the bank. But he thought about it more than a few times. This is called Edgar's Not-So-Secret Life. His clothes, all snowman's discards, so he dressed in permanent winter. His wind-up clock stayed stuck at 1. That was fine, since he didn't believe in AM or PM or mountain time, or that it could rain in Memphis when it was perfectly sunny here. When he wasn't making a meal of instant pablum, he liked to tinker with an antique clown car, one with imaginary horn and time travel switch. And there were bongo lessons for anyone who asked. All he asked was a gift of a penny serenade. Remember those? Each song starts with ah, ends with oh well. The best part, Twinkie-like in the middle. As for Twinkies, he was fond of them and found very little to disappoint. In fact, after he gave up coffee, he remained fond of heavy cream. You know, I actually haven't looked through this since I published it. I didn't realize how many food references there are in it. This may speak to my weight problem. This goes with the next poem, which is called Campbell's Soups, which is honestly out of my love for Andy Warhol, but has nothing to do with Warhol. So if you're a Warhol aficionado, then you'll appreciate that. But again, you don't have to know. It's Campbell's Soups. The labels have fallen off my soup cans. I'll have a grilled cheese with something for dinner. That's been my day. A morning unicycle ride to the grocery store and the weekly discussion with myself about Elizabeth Bishop, pro and con, over a lunch bagel. An afternoon penny toss in front of the courthouse was my favorite social time. I just wish I'd found someone to play with. Penny toss solitaire is less fun. But that's been my day. I followed a cat up a tree. I got stuck. The cat got down. Firemen came and laughed at my kilt and suspenders. I've never met a fireman interested in either fashion or Scottish history. My chief rescuer had tomato soup breath as he carried me down. And this next poem, I have the title because I had never seen umpteen, which is, I think, a perfectly good Southern word in any poem. So I wanted to find a use for it. So this title's called Less Than Umpteen Things. I'm going to go out and join a fight club as soon as I leave the nail salon. By that, of course, I mean I'm going to a cat rescue center and do my Sunday shopping. This morning started off badly when the sun rose in the north and not even the local rooster knew what to do. At some point, Chicken Little will be proved right. I try to reference Chicken Little at least once a week. Normally, that reference comes on a Tuesday. That's what's on my calendar anyway. I really love false positive narratives as a child. These days, I love crossword puzzles and action movies, a little bourbon in my Shirley Temple, and a spell check on my home tattoo kit. We all have to give up things after a while. I'm going to give up sunglasses as soon as this pair wears out. And this poem is called My Father's Advice. If you find yourself in a black and white movie, watch out for quicksand. That's not something you hear every day, but by that point, he was already dreaming about kudzu on the fence's other side. Mother already gone off to the Always discount store. No one else to tell me where to go, what to do, the best way to make grilled cheese without cheese or bread, or the 7 best names for a pet fish. A parent's work never done. All I learned on my own came from the time I invited the dung beetle to my birthday party. That kindness never repeated. Both my parents, all my guests, said rightfully, never again. And this is called Little Pink Ode with Smiley Face. It was about the time I was old enough to vote, drink, and play subway guitar without embarrassment. Newly degreed in dust bunny analysis, I was already good at faking sincerity. For all the common reasons, I was stepping away from real estate and into role playing. Usually, I was a large bunny with a bleach and sugarcane problem. Every surprise I came upon was a little vacation. Most days were spent not being fancy, just being dancy. When I went to get mail, I always tried to impersonate John Wayne's walk. None of my neighbors knew John Wayne. They thought of me as the red bathrobe man who always carried a pinwheel. And then this last poem is called The Fearful Polymath. The Fearful Polymath. The thought of rising tides and no boats is one fear. Mismatched socks, another. Do you often run naked right out of your dreams? Don't worry. At least you aren't falling into a constellation of hair, which has never approached a brush. None of that is on today's calendar in red ink or otherwise. Though right on time, the man in the Sunday croquet outfit comes along. He's selling snow cones advice combos. No matter what you get, the price is the same. So you go with a cherry blueberry mix and normal gypsy cliches. He adds a tiny umbrella, so you look more like an adult, or you lick and crunch your ice. Thank you guys very much. This is from Journeyman's Suitcase. It's available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or from the publisher, Luchador Press. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. Thanks so much. So, Julie, take it away.
Thank you, Colin. So I'll start off by saying thank you to Joe and Allie and Georgia Center for the book. Thank you to JC and to Mike for being here, to Poetry Atlanta, and to Colin Kelly. And thank you, Colin, for starting us off with Yvonne's poem tonight. That was awesome. I also want to thank all of you that are taking time out of your schedules and your lives to give some love and support to poetry. And I would like to give a special thank you to my Bennington friends that are here and my Ohio friends and the Atlanta writing community and pressmates. So I'm going to be reading from my first full-length collection of poetry, Slide to Unlock, which was published last month with Sibling Rivalry Press. So if you are not familiar with their mission and their tenacious presence and their graciousness, I highly encourage you to take a look at them. And as Colin mentioned earlier, they are offering free shipping with the code READ at checkout. It's been a decade of working on a manuscript that questions our shifting boundaries of intimacy in a digital landscape. How do we, for instance, perceive or know each other differently online versus in person? Slide to Unlock explores this in two ways. One, through a narrative arc and love story, and two, through inviting us to reflect on the seduction of tech language, the deeper implications of words like cellular. If you've interacted with an iPhone in the last decade, you will know that the phrase slide to unlock is on the entry screen to access information, to search, to open, respond. It asks for our bodies to open it. You will also notice that it is a command. And when our phones demand that we pick up, we do. But Slide to Unlock is also a navigation in how we communicate. Social media and apps, of course, but also text, email, calls, and the slow fade of the art of letter writing. So imagine now that this book is born into the world at this very moment when we are resetting, when we are reconnecting and connecting, when we are having touch without touch. Your screen right now in your hand. These poems coming to you not in person from me, but over an interface. So I'm going to share 5 poems from Slide to Unlock. And I'm going to open with one that takes a little trip down memory lane. I enjoy reading this poem to younger audiences because I usually have to spend a few minutes explaining some terminology to them because they have not had an experience with this particular device. However, with this audience, I think that I might be okay. And since my dad is tuned in and my family is all here, I'm reading this for my dad because it's his favorite poem in the book. This is called Rotary Ode. Remember the receiver waiting in its cradle where an answer could remain. Recall the rotary, where without the ring we could not know if the call even was. It was easier then to lie about our absences. How we could pick up with silence, blame the line, invisible to our name, called over and over, our mouths lost to response. How we could lift it, check the dial tone, a flat line of sound confirming our here. How if we held through the beat, pulse, 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 we could break into the dead, busy the signal. How we answered with expectation, a prayer of who might be. Hello? For all those times it wasn't you, or was. How we didn't want the hang up, pulling the cord under the threshold, dragging it into another room like a small throb of desire, wrapping the spirals around our wrists, binding ourselves to the other end voice, wired. Or the way we unplugged it from the jack to stop the insistence, how it sat watching us, keeping its place, a monument on top of phone books, the yellowed exchanges of possibility. And the way we almost effortlessly left it behind, closing the door on its persuasions, never imagining already it was a parasite, that we were the ones unable to be left to our own devices. It's always surreal reading into the silence. And so by contrast, I'm going to read a poem that's part of the narrative arc of the manuscript. There's a longer footnote in the collection, but what you need to know is it is based on a bridge that is in Paris that was covered in locks. And all of the locks, the weight of them were causing the bridge panels to collapse. And since we are on lockdown, and I'm also rethinking that word, and this is Slide to Unlock, I thought I would read you Lock Bridge. This is Lock Bridge 2008. He stands in the middle, night Paris rising from the Seine. Rain parts, leaves a gloss, flecked catches of light, the seemingly endless brass, hitched and held one over the other. They've begun a new tradition. Lock a lock to the bridge, drop the key into the river's bed. The weight of this, already creaking Pont des Arts, beginning the bow. So many combinations of we or us sealed in the vow of click, how each one dialed into the heart, bound to the tumble, willingly chose the heft in hand. What of the others, taken from a pocket, a simple rotary of thumb and forefinger, turning the secret code? He lifts them now, one after the other, notes each as title, story stamped to lock body. Master, triumph, hero, guard, honesty, frame, protects, valor, climax, best. All this locking as owning, as holding cell, claiming love. He traces over lovers, initials, scratched as with nail or key, as if to free or bind themselves, fingers gone numb for attempted eternal. But none of this stops the yearning, the wondering where our lives have been these last 17 years. In Paris, he feels the collapse, the insistence upon insistence, no seeming end to the vanishing point. These once promises, now small, cumulative prisons of love, persuasions to do what cannot be undone. He unlocks his phone, hovers over me, pin of my city, distant in the map of his poem. Okay, since there is an Ohio contingent here, I thought that I would also read this poem about an Ohio landmark that I think has memories for many of you. This is Switching Off at Cedar Point. Years later, after hearing of your divorce, her infidelity, I remember another time. The four of us, my husband, your wife, would switch children, hip jiggle babies, so the other could ride, so we all could take a turn to throw our hands to sky and scream legitimately all the way down. We did this over and over, laughing ourselves to younger, such pink spun release. And well after dark, just before closing, in the shuffle of strollers and lines, you and I are alone on a crowded shuttle. Without a word, you rest your heavy head in my lap, face away, and whether from exhaustion or want, I allow myself one last pleasure, to run my fingers through the thick question of your hair. You slide one arm beneath my knees, the other over the top, press back to me, as if to keep from falling or screaming. And when we stopped, they were waiting. The man, the woman, the sticky sleeping children, all the beautiful ones we'd once said yes to. This is Observations from the Base after Lake Santitla, North Carolina. The problem with heights, they are heights. Again, the resistance of water. How each kiss somehow is an attempt to recreate, not make new. Lust, a four-letter word. Also, what? I have self-covenants. One, to imagine no other when with you. By the fire, I slip. I curse myself for not loving better. When I ask you if I am someone else, you say, only you. I want to be this mountain, but then I swim. The problem with covenants, they are covenants. Later, you say this to me. The blank space is how I honor it, deliciously gone. Even the fog makes promises, spans the hips of mountains. Such great heights, the fire-wet ashes we cannot light again. And I'm going to close with this poem. And there's a small story that goes with it. So I mentioned earlier that there's the narrative arc, but the book itself, Slide to Unlock, is a bit of a love letter, and it's a bit of a love letter to my hometown of Toledo, Ohio. So I'm going to tell you a story of synchronicity, because I think we kind of need some synchronicity, and we need some fairy tale, and we need some magic at this chapter. So imagine the very first work of art that you fell in love with, the first painting, the first photograph, the first sculpture, how it taught you, how it stayed with you, how it transformed you. To me, this was one of those paintings, and I'm going to hope that you all can see it. The wonders of the screen being right in front of you. This is Antibes scene from La Salle, which is at the Toledo Museum of Art. Now imagine years later that the universe nudged you to write a poem about this painting that you've carried with you since you were young. An ekphrastic poem, which is a poem written in response to art. And the thing that you love, poetry, somehow wins a contest at the Toledo Museum of Art. And all those years later, those words that chose you, that came to you as a poem, now hang next to this very painting that has never left you from the time that you were little. That was 2015. Synchronicity, magic, a bit of a fairy tale. As James Dickey said, it's all real within the dream, and the world is possibility. So here's a poem for you of possibility. And this is Côte d'Azur, 17 years later, after Claude Monet's Antibes scene from La Salle, Toledo Museum of Art. It begins in gold, this pointing upward of leaves, how the branches rise, propose an unseen union. Note the olive tree, the hidden live in its name, the way it arrives, mouthed, silent, as I love. Wonder about the couple, left unpainted, how we imagined ourselves then stippled as a tangle in the grass, kept from Monet's canvas. How we held this vision in our years of absence, the tinge of me inseparable from the mark of you. What Monet said of this place: it was impossible to paint without gemstones. Its beautiful madness, a fairy tale of air and light. Listen to the dazzle of that waiting city, the way it calls us to believe, how we want to dismiss story, drown innocence in the sea below. After 17 years, a quarry of space between us, I return to this landscape. I open my hand to a fairy tale of air and light. Expect only memory, not the sudden slide of your fingers taking mine, or how we paint ourselves here again into the impossible.
Thank you, Julie. And there's a lot of, I opened up the gallery, there's a lot of clapping and snapping. You can't hear, so you might be reading into the void, but there's a lot of people out there watching. So JC, over to you.
Hi, everybody. This is, oh, it's backwards, but this is what magic may not alter. And it's a narrative story, Southern Gothic. And so most of the poems are storytelling, but there are other poems in there. And so the first poem I'm going to read will give you sort of the introduction of the characters and the world. Summer Portrait, oh, I should say this is set in the, the early part of the 20th century in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is actually my hometown. Summer Portrait, 1912. In dark suits and matching robin's egg-washed gray ties, Benton and Stonewall, straight-backed as young oaks, stand on the porch stairs behind Mama, and the other behind Granny B. Wally, a head taller than Benton but 2 years younger, laughs. At a joke, perhaps, or at a dog chasing a squirrel off camera. The corners of Benton's mouth turn up too, but his eyes stray heavenward, though it's 4 years until the seminary. Mama's smile is all teeth, but not horsey. How like a Gibson girl she looks in her new frock, not unlike when she was married. The beading on her shirtwaist twinkles with the sun and may surely leave fairy flares on the film. The pleats of her skirt stay fresh pressed despite the heat. She cuddles Ross Marta, then only a kitten, and doesn't mind the cat hair. Granny B cocks her head to the left, her lips twitching as she tries to hold back a cackle. 20 years out of date, leg of mutton sleeves on her black bombazine hover like planets to either side of her, and Cole, sitting on her knee, seems to fall into their orbit, his wide moon face almost dwarfed by their expanse. Magnolia, a little thin, stands between the elder boys, her glossy hair drawn back into a bow the size of angel wings. Freckles dapple her cheeks prettily, though some of the detail will be lost in the noon sunshine. The twins, tall for their age and fluffy as meringues in yards of white ruffled lawn, hold hands before her. Vi's heart-shaped face peeps through a curtain of corkscrew curls, but her expression is welcoming as an open window. Only Lula, as if she turned her head at the last moment, avoids the camera's gaze. She is smiling too, but at what she'd never say. A motif that runs throughout the book is about an oak tree that will show young women who they are meant to marry. It's a bit of folklore. They say, plant a daffodil at Old Wives' Oak. You will meet your future husband on the day it blooms. Early spring, the ground boasts an orchestra of trumpets, the wishes of other brides pushing up between yawns of yellow grass. Even Mama, never one for folklore and doubtful Narcissus could conjure a husband worth a damn, found herself down on her knees, digging a hole for bulbs called Lovejoy and Aflame. If Granny B said it was high time she put her linens in order, could Mama do otherwise? 2 years later, she'd married Deli, but she'd seen his brother Cavett too, that February day she and Daddy met, and hoped the right bloom had opened first. There's a lot of magic in this story, but I'm very partial to herbalism, and so there are herbs throughout, not in this poem, but something to keep in mind. What you need to know about this poem, this next poem, is that the poem makes reference to the kernel, and that is the name of a magnolia tree. Elegy for Coal. Mama's cat would have come down eventually, when she got hungry, when she got tired. We all said so. You were so proud as you scuttled up the colonel's trunk like a Louisiana black bear and inched your way out on that gangly branch, not much thicker than a broomstick, where Rosmerta sat trembling, yowling, the crow she'd chased long flown off. We could not hear soft words you spoke, but something of a Sibley lilt charmed the owls to muse and then to quiet watchfulness. When you scooped her into your arms, the way a bear grabs at fish over a waterfall, she might have panicked. But she settled over your left shoulder like a sack of sugar, and you scooted your way back down the trunk, back towards the trunk, using your right hand for balance. The crack, when it came, seemed almost offhand, lazy and loud as a bear yawn. You kept the cat close, your arm tourniquet tight, even as her nails must have pierced your flesh, even as your own nails dug vainly into bark and caught only air for 30 feet, missing lower branches as if magic miscalculated to slow descent. We scrambled beneath the kernel, thought softer bodies could ease your impact. At 10 feet, Rosmerta leapt free, and though you landed mostly on top of us, the back of your head found the only axe-sharp rock jutting from the soil. So hard were we laughing you were saved, we overlooked it till we stood you up. You wobbled, cried out, and pitched forward into Vidalia, and we saw blood. Blood and shattered bone matting brown curls over a rift in your skull, deep as Southern honor. Maggie raced to get Mama and Granny B, a spell to stanch the bleeding, but you were dead. That night in the sky, Ursa Minor glowed unusually bright, and we knew the heavens had already made you their own. So the villain of this story is named Bonham Ferry. He's courting Vidalia, and Tallulah despises him. He's a bad guy. Bonham Ferry comes to call. Look at him, spread out on Granny B's swan's down settee like rancid butter on a biscuit, with that bouquet of snapdragons he snitched from the widow's yard. You'd think Vi'd seen right through him with his pomaded hair, that smirk wide as his lapels, the way he hisses all his S's like a lisping cotton mouth. But she and Mama are snowed as the Arctic. It's always Bonham this and Bonham that, and isn't he such a fine young man? If he's so upright, why does it seem like everything I know about him is slanted? I've heard things. Oh, that he's been seen at the cat houses at St. Paul's Bottoms, owes people money, that a Creole girl on Fannin Street's gone missing, and the last person seen with her was a blonde boy in a Cadillac Model S. I can't prove anything. But even once in a while, the aspersions Mrs. Crockett casts on Shreveport's elite when she's buying supplies and running her mouth off at Dixon's ring just a little truer than the rest. And he does flash that caddy around. But there's no repeating this to Vi. She wouldn't believe those rumors anyhow. That's why I've kept my mouth shut so far. But if Vidalia's setting her cap for the likes of him, only heartache can come of it. And no amount of moony incantations and goddess invocations will set things aright. He's a bad, bad man, and we'll all be sorry. I'd like to take that bottle of hooch poking out of his coat pocket and dump it right over his greasy old head. But Granny's bees asked me to serve him lemonade. Oh, were it strychnine instead. So here's a poem that has some of the herbalism in it. Caddo Lake Elixir. Vidalia tethers the brittle moon to a thick cypress on the Texas side of the Tar Island slough, while I nurse my hands from the paddles chafing. It didn't seem so far from Hawley Arm when we set out after supper, but half a mile's rowing has brought out the mosquitoes, and the sky, sinking to purple, casts its reproach along with the shadows. It's more than a mile around the island, and there might be gators. Worries too mundane for Vidalia's magic, but not for me. To navigate by starlight might work for sea captains, but I have neither sextant nor compass to guide our voyage back and hope someone turns the lantern on at the pier. Undaunted, she opens her satchel, draws out a beeswax candle, cardamom, clove, and damiana leaves. She lights the candle on the seat beside her and scoops some lake water into a bowl, tosses in the herbs. This she heats above a flame a few minutes, whispers words too soft to be heard over the bullfrogs and cicadas, then sips. If she twists her face up like a dish towel at the taste, I don't see it, but feel my own wrinkle in sympathy. So mote it be, she says, pouring the rest back into the lake and blowing out the candle, whose smoke threads its way unseen into the fabric of the evening. We can go. She unties the boat from the tree and pushes us back into the channel. As the paddles cut through the slough, a hint of clove catches on the breeze like grace. Buck Moon. On the bush and bramble side that fringes toward the wood, a white-tailed stag sniffs the air, then lowers its tongue to Caddo's edge to drink. Under your watch, its 8 points gleam a dull, milky opal, and catch in a cattail cluster. With a quick head shake and a nose blow nearly laugh-like, it frees its antlers. Another sip. The deer finishes its lake water nightcap as it clops off into the loblollies, alert but unhurried. You darken to think of hunters sleeping now, dreaming all of Actaeon's fate. I have a friend here. This last one is called Harvest Moon. In fields pregnant with pumpkins, we 7 women gather to hail the harvest, tossing seeds and nuts like confetti, offerings for the titmice and starlings, the catbirds and swallows on their way down south. Bowls, muscadines, and gooseberries spill over for unpicky possums. Chunks of persimmon and pear tempt voles, hares, and errant skunks. This ritual sharing, a rebuke against winter's skeletal embrace, reminds us to praise what is ever full, your grace, the source of all holies, and soon to our bellies. Under your maroon gold gaze tonight, there are apples to roast, ears of corn to pop, pomegranate, quince, and huckleberry tarts to eat by the hundredweight when the dance of thanks is done. Thank you. And speaking of thanks, thank you to Julie and to Mike and Colin and Georgia Center of the Book and Decatur Public Library for sponsoring this program tonight. Thanks.
JC, thank you so much. And thank you, yes, buy that book, it's fantastic. So thank you to Mike and to Julie and to JC. Virtually clap and snap for them and for them reading tonight. And thank you, yes, to Georgia Center for the Book, to Joe and to Allie for helping to facilitate this. We had a really great, we were up like well over 50 people watching. I guess that was including us too, but that's a really great number for a Zoom reading of poetry on a Monday night, I think. So thank you so much for attending tonight. We're going to be having another reading in July. I don't know if it's going to be on Zoom or if it's going to be live and in person at the library. So stay tuned. If you're on Facebook, be sure to follow the Poetry Atlanta page. On Facebook, we not only list what's happening with our organization, but with all of the groups in Atlanta and all the open mics. So a lot of other groups and organizations are doing online and virtual readings. So be sure to go to Poetry Atlanta on Facebook and check that out. And I know Georgia Center for the Book, of course, has many other things coming up. So thank you again. So we're going to do some questions now. So if you open up the...
Yeah, anybody has any questions? If anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and send them through the chat. Hopefully, if we get this down in the future, there's a lovely little raise hand feature. And, you know, I didn't want to tax Allie too much this evening and test it. But feel free if you all have any questions. You know, I just would once again like to thank Colin and everything that Poetry Atlanta does, and Julie and Mike and JC for reading tonight. And as I said before, you know, do go out there and look at your independent bookstores and see who's doing mailing, see who's doing drop-off, see who's doing curbside. You know, Little Shop of Stories, Acapella, Karis, Eagle Eye, Read It Again Books are all doing wonderful jobs in the community. Not only uplifting folks, but actually surprising them with how fast they're getting books to them in this time. You know, so if anybody has anything, let us know. You know, if there's no questions, you know, have a wonderful evening. Allie, in one of these wonderful little boxes over here, will be posting this shortly to our Facebook page. I can see that, YouTube, by the way. Yeah, the nudge things. You're online, we can all see it. So it will be posted. Feel free to share it. And, you know, just for the love of the word and for love of poetry, stay safe, treat each other well, and keep on reading. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everybody. And good night.
Good night.
Good night, Capote.
Good night, Cheryl Floyd Miller.
Good night, Cheryl.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Julie.
I owe you a phone
Hi, I'm
call.
so glad you came.
I owe you a phone call. You'll get it soon.
Okay, cool.
There you are. Good to see you.
Yes.
So everyone's catching up.
Yep.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you again, Joe and Allie.
Good night.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jay.
Colin.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. That was wonderful.
JC, I can't wait to see your book in print. And Mike, it was so great to hear your work too. Oh, he's already disappeared. Okay.